We're good to go. So firstly, just let me, on behalf of my colleague Laura Martin and myself, to say thank you very much for the invitation, for the warm hospitality, but equally as important, in particular when we do the work that we do in terms of service to others. Thank you for your service and your generosity of spirit to others, be that in Australia or internationally. I'm really fortunate today that in my presentation or conversation with you all, I'm joined by my colleague Laura Martin, who is a senior manager responsible for what we call the Adelaide Zero project, which she'll talk to, which essentially focuses on ending rough sleeping in the heart of Adelaide. And it's been running for some time. It may be familiar to some of you, but she'll talk to you about the work itself and the great achievements that the collaboration is achieving with folks. In terms of our time together, I'm going to speak briefly about why do people become homeless, who is homeless. If you do come into contact with someone who is at risk of homelessness or experiencing homelessness, some go-to organisations, I think it's always useful to have those handy. And then, as I said, Lauren will speak specifically to the Adelaide Zero project. There are a couple of points that I want to make before I get into the space of why people become homeless. The first point for me, from the work and the service that I have undertaken in community for a long time, is that people don't choose to become homeless. It's a bit like folks don't wake up in the morning and say, I think I'll live in a state of poverty in this country. It simply does not exist. Now, I do want to say also, though, when I often say the comment, people choose not to become homeless, sometimes someone raises with me, but Liv, I've come across someone living on the streets and I've offered accommodation or we've tried to provide accommodation and they've said no. My response is, we need to understand the experience and the story of the person that led them to the streets. And we also need to understand that sometimes we offer accommodation in places where people feel safer to be out on the streets than in the space that's been offered. So the response of no isn't through the extension of the hand of friendship to someone who is sleeping rough, but often around where the person is likely to be placed and the risk that placement and possible damage it could cause to that person. So I think that's really important to say from the outset, that people don't choose a life on the streets. The other point I'd like to make is that the issue of rough sleeping, in particular in a country as wealthy as Australia, is in fact solvable. We can actually solve rough sleeping in the country. Again, some folks will say, well, that sounds like a tall order. Absolutely it does. But let's just take a moment and think about the greatness of this country and in particular the social movements that have occurred over decades, including the rights around people's labour rights in this country. I'm sure there were folks that probably thought that we couldn't introduce the 7.5, 8-hour day, or that we couldn't introduce improvements to people's employment rights. But we have. Equally, we've stopped the sale of tobacco to young children, to young people, through aggressive marketing and advertising. It springs from a commitment of local people saying, actually, we can do better than this. We're a country that should be doing better than this, and we should be affording everybody the opportunity to live a fulsome life, and that includes the right to housing. So it is possible. The other thing I would say finally is that everyone that experiences homelessness, everyone that we come into contact with through service, it is a privilege. We see in the person a unique story, and everything that we do is about dignifying that person and the offering of assistance that we make to that person. And homelessness should be a rare, brief and a once-off experience. It is not a way of life for people. So when we talk about why people become homeless, there's never one reason. It's often multiple. And it does include, without a doubt, unaffordable housing. If we look around even what's been in the media for the last 12 months, closer to 18 months, we are experiencing some absolute challenges in the housing market, be that people that are pursuing home ownership, be that people trying to get into or maintain private rental accommodation, which makes up about 30% of our housing market, be that people that should be eligible and receive public housing because we simply don't have the stock. And we should have the stock because public housing is part of the housing market. It also stimulates employment. It also creates a revenue base in terms of taxation. And of course, we've got a very small community housing sector as well. Housing, in particular in the private rental market, is becoming very unaffordable, and part of it is because of the demand-supply issue, but also we don't have necessarily consistent or good regulation across the country in terms of what would be considered fair and reasonable in terms of rents that we set. Domestic violence, family breakdown contributes to someone being at risk or experiencing homelessness. Absolutely unemployment, but not only unemployment, but an absence of regular, permanent employment. You can be employed, but you might not be able to afford your home or the mortgage or the rent for that month. And we're seeing an increase in the numbers of people occupying multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. There is no doubt that poor health does contribute to someone's risk of housing insecurity or homeless or being homeless. I've certainly seen over my time where people have held jobs for a very long time and then a significant health crisis occurs and the support and the resources and the assistance simply is not there, and they find themselves reaching out to a charity for assistance, or they reach out when it's a bit too late and they've lost their accommodation and they are facing time on the streets. We also see folks exiting institutions such as correctional services and also hospitals. It might surprise folks that we do have a number of people that knock on our door that say, "I've been discharged from hospital, I have nowhere to go, can you assist me?" And that's certainly an area that we're doing further work in terms of better connection, a better understanding with the hospital providers in terms of what is their role to ensure that someone does not get discharged into hospital, out of hospital into homelessness, and what is our role in supporting that. And Lauren's certainly leading some great work in that space. In terms of some figures, on any given night, the ABS estimates over 122,000 folks who are experiencing homelessness. You think about the MCG in Melbourne, that's 100,000 capacity, and add another 22,000. So it is significant. 1 in 7 people experiencing homelessness are in fact children. 1 in 5 experiencing homelessness identify as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander as well. And at any given time, those who are rough sleeping equate to about 6%. Now, 6% doesn't sound like a huge number, and in some levels, probably comparatively in terms of international numbers, it isn't. And our position is, well, if the number isn't that great, with the right investment, with the right structural change, then we can actually ensure that rough sleeping is solved. Doesn't exist at the numbers that it does around this country. So people are afforded a safe place to live with the necessary supports. We also are seeing an increase, and this again is really no surprise to folks here, the number of people who are reaching out to not only homelessness funded services, but emergency relief services, financial counselling service when their home is at risk, they're unable to make a mortgage payment or a rental payment, or simply they have nowhere to go. And there is an absolute mismatch between the numbers that are knocking on the door for assistance and our ability to respond to the needs of people knocking on the door, rather than just simply saying, well, we can give you a food parcel, but we can't assist you with your rental payment, so we might see you again in a month when you're actually without a home, then trying to look for accommodation. In South Australia, yes, there's been a lot of changes to how homelessness services operate, with some structural changes that happened a couple of years ago. But I would say this: if you come across someone who is experiencing homelessness, the first point of call is a statewide service called Homelessness Connect. Their role is almost like the front door. By contacting Homelessness Connect or encouraging the person to contact Homelessness Connect, they will get an experienced worker at the end of the phone who will have a chat with them and then direct them to the best service to get the assistance that they need. If it's around domestic violence, there is also a free call 1-800 number and a website for people to engage with to get the assistance that they need. And it always starts with a conversation. You know, a conversation with someone who might be on the street begging, seeking food, or that you come into contact with. A conversation that starts with the offering of friendship, an exchange of names, empathy for the plight of that person, and then gently encouraging them to take the next step, which is reaching out to a service that may be able to assist. I'm now going to hand over to Lauren, who will talk specifically about the Adelaide Zero project, and then Lauren and I will share some thoughts around what it may take to address some of these issues, not only within South Australia but across the country, and then we're happy to take some questions from there. Thank you.
Thank you. I realised I was on photo duty and I didn't take any photos during that time, so sorry. I just pulled up the camera as this popped up. So as Liv said, my role is to look after the Adelaide Zero project, and I think we heard a lot of stats that were pretty shocking, but this is probably a little bit around what we're doing about it. So essentially we believe that we can do something about homelessness and we can end homelessness. When it does occur though, because regardless of how we approach it, there will still be occurrences of homelessness. We want to make sure that those occurrences are rare, brief, and a one-time thing. The way that we do that is through a methodology of which the Adelaide Zero project works with. So Adelaide Zero started in 2018, and it was with the goal of achieving functional zero by 2025. Focusing purely on street homelessness in the inner city of Adelaide. So basically functional zero is we achieve that when we have the amount of people coming into the system is no greater than the people who are exiting the system through a housing outcome. So since 2018, we have this. Apologies, this stat is a little bit old. So since 2018, we have identified over 2,000 people who have experienced rough sleeping in the Adelaide CBD. We've also been able to provide housing outcomes for 1,000 of those people. We've had 1,000 housing outcomes, so there's been placements into housing for over 1,000 people, which is really fantastic. We do that through a number of different ways, and one of the ways that we do that is to run what we call a by name list, and that is a particular list of or a document of all the people that we come across while they are rough sleeping. We have their names, we have their details, we know them by name, so we know what their needs are, and we understand how best to support those people, because as Liv said before, every person's experience is slightly different. Not everybody is going to be able to live the way that we would like to be able to provide them with, so we need to understand what's happening for them so that we can find a solution for them that meets their needs. So the methodology is it's a national change effort that is leading communities around Australia and certainly around the world to end rough sleeping. Internationally, we have knowledge from the States, from Canada, from the UK, all doing similar work using this methodology. Nationally, I've just got a little Liv, your computer's got a thing and I can't see what I'm saying. No, it's fine, I'll just have to. So nationally we have sort of developed tools and processes to meet the national need. And then we're supported by the AAEH and the SAEH to support the local communities through improvement cycles, through developing training and coaching, and through infrastructure and tools to do this work. So the methodology itself starts with a shared vision, and we're looking to end homelessness in Australia, and we're starting with a population that we know that we can do some really good work with, and that for us is rough sleepers. And we're ensuring that when people do come into our community as a rough sleeper, that it is rare, brief and non-reoccurring. We do that through 4 different approaches. We look to end homelessness through a housing first approach. So we're not looking essentially for everyone to have everything that's happened for them sorted and ready to live in a house. We're saying we need to provide the housing first, and then we need to support people to be able to maintain that housing. We're person-centred and we're strengths-based. We're using evidence-based systems to change, evidence-based system change approach. So we're really looking to collaborate to look at the issues that are happening system-wide and implementing change to support that. And then we're looking for collective impact. We do that through 8 different solutions, and you can probably... Oh, actually, you can't read it on the screen because I haven't been moving. There we go. So the way that we do that is very specific. We spend a lot of time doing action planning and target planning, so we're making sure that we're very intentional in the work that we do. We have really great support from the Toward Home Alliance, and they run a really fantastic assertive outreach program. So they are out 2 times a day, 365 days a year, making contact with the people who are sleeping rough in our community. We run a real-time quality by name list, so that is the document that has everybody's details on that. We know where they are, we know what their history is, we know what their needs are, and we know how to work with them to support them into housing. We work with coordinated systems, so we bring in those services and systems that are complementary to us. So we do a lot of work with DCS or corrections, we do a lot of work with health, we do a lot of work across the sector to make sure that when something has happened in one area, we know about it in our area. We're continuously improving what we do. We have a really great team of people that make sure that when we're looking at what is working and what isn't working, that we're developing strategies and frameworks to support that work. Data-driven prevention, data-informed system advocacy. We have a lot of support from the South Australian Housing Authority to make sure that our data it gives us a really good understanding and tells us what we need to do. And more of the right housing and support. Again, we're really well supported by South Australian Housing Authority in terms of housing. So functional zero, as I said before, is really quite simple. We need to make sure that we have enough housing for people that are coming into the system, and we reach functional zero when people coming in are able to be met with the housing outflow. I'm conscious that we're probably going a bit over time. I've spoken around the by name list. We probably don't need to talk too much about that, but look, it is a really, really significant tool of the work that we do, and it does provide that dignity for people because we know their story, and we're able to tailor approaches to their needs. One of the ways that we do that is by using a tool called the VI SPDAT, which really allows us to prioritise where our efforts are. Essentially, when somebody comes into our service and we identify them as a rough sleeper, we work with them, we build rapport, and then we have a look at what is going on for them. It's called the Vulnerability Index, Service Prioritisation Decision-Making Tool, and that allows us to understand who is most vulnerable in our community and how we need to work with them to find housing. We will shortly be changing that, which is really, really exciting for us because it will be, this tool was developed in the States or Canada? The States, yeah. And so the AAEH and SAEH have been working really hard to make sure that we have a tool that reflects our communities. So that's a really exciting piece of work that we're doing. So that's a little bit of what the Zero Project does. We have 18 months, and we are working really consistently and really well with our systems to make sure that we will achieve our target of zero rough sleeping or functional zero by 2025. But I'll hand back to Liv to speak to ending homelessness and what's needed. Oh, have we run out of time?
Obviously, I'm not Liv. But Liv, can I just invite you back to the stage? Thank you so much. That was such an engaging topic, and I feel like there's so much to unpack in that space. But thank you for making the time. But before I throw to the Rotarians for a very warm thank you, I just want to, I've got a bit of a gift for you guys. So as a token of our appreciation, we've got some history books that have been locally produced by some of our fellow Rotarians. And President Cam, I think, has written a little message on the inside. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also, on behalf of our club and on behalf in your name, we're going to make a donation to Adelaide Rotary projects locally. So Rotarians, if I can invite you to stand and put your hands together for a very warm thank you.